Hi, I'm Tess Hembree. I'm NAHRO's Director of Congressional Relations, and I'm here to tell you what you should be doing if you've got a new member of Congress. We had an election recently, and there's about 85-ish new members of Congress coming in January. A lot of these people haven't been to D.C., they haven't worked at a D.C. office before, and they don't really know what is going on now that they've gotten elected. It's a pretty hectic time for these people. They've spent the last 2 years campaigning, and so now they have to transition very quickly into congressman, congresswoman, or senator mode. So they're going to be doing things like staffing up offices, trying to figure out issues on the ground, and making a personal move to DC all in a really short amount of time. This is a great opportunity for you to be really helpful to your new member of Congress. So I'm going to walk you through a checklist of some things you should be doing and take a look at the calendar for the next 2 months to give you an understanding of how hectic their schedule really is going to be. So here's the checklist. Today you should write them a congratulatory note introducing yourself. Let them know that you're excited that they're coming to Washington on your behalf, and let them know who you are, who your agency is, and what you guys do in the district or state. Then call the campaign office. It's probably the best way to get a hold of the candidate, or sorry, the member of Congress at this point. Ask the staff, whoever picks up the phone, for an email contact for the new member, or ask for which staffer is leading the transition, get their contact info. So I would go ahead and email that letter and let them know you're really excited to meet them at some point. In the next week or so after you send that email, make sure that you call the office, the campaign office again, to follow up on that email. At that point, I would request a meeting with the member or staff if the member is unavailable. The staff that you meet with now in the transition may not necessarily be housing staff in the DC office in January, but a lot of the times campaign staff, if they're working a transition, end up working either at the district's or state office or in the DC office. So it's good to know people in the office regardless of whether this is the housing person in the end. So make sure you call and follow up with them, request a meeting, and see if you can get some FaceTime with the new member of Congress. And again, if you do get some FaceTime, it really is just an introduction. Let them know who you are, what your agency does. Bring some photos of projects or things that you've been working on, and talk about some of the challenges on the ground. I wouldn't worry so much about anything that's happening in Congress right now, because all of the bills that are introduced now are going to die at the end of this Congress and have to be reintroduced. So that's a conversation you can save for January. In December, just make sure that you're continuing to follow up with the staff people that you've started to develop that relationship with. Make sure that you're a resource for them as they're staffing up the office and trying to figure out exactly what their housing positions are going to be. Again, it's a very hectic time for the new member of Congress because they're making a personal move as well. And they may have a lot of things to deal with their families on top of trying to put together an entirely new office in a situation that just may be very unfamiliar to them. So you can be a huge, huge asset to them. And then in January, they'll be in office. So make sure that you get the contact information for their new Washington office and check in with the new housing staffer to introduce yourself again and make sure that they know that you're a resource for them. So those are the things you should be doing between now and January. And let's take a look at the calendar so you can get a sense of how quickly all of this is going to move. So on Tuesday, November 13th is an important day because the lame duck session of Congress begins, which means that everybody who was in Congress before the election will come back to DC to deal with any unfinished business. Your new member of Congress will not come to DC yet. So this gives them an opportunity to stay at home and try to deal with things before they make the move to DC. Again, a really great time for you to meet with them. Mid-December, at some point, they'll come here or wherever the speaker decides to do some new member orientation. They'll learn about Congress, very basic 101 information. They'll get their office assignments, which is a really important thing, and then they'll be able to begin the process of hiring their staff. Come January, Congress swears into office on or around January 3rd, not wasting any time after the new year. They'll start to get their committee assignments, so pay close attention to when the committee assignments are announced so you can get a sense of what your new member of Congress will be focused on specifically. The offices should be fully staffing up at this point, so if your member of Congress hasn't hired a housing staffer by the end of January or early February, they probably will at least assign that topic to a staff person. And then finally, third week of January is the State of the Union address, and that's really when the policy work of Congress begins for the year. The president will come up to Capitol Hill and talk about what he wants to see happen in the year. The following week is the first week of February, And the president's budget will be released on around the first Monday, and that really kicks off the appropriations process, which is very time-consuming even for members of Congress who aren't on the appropriations committee, because every member makes an appropriations request. So that's a very hectic, time-consuming thing that the office will have to deal with right away. It's a really great thing for you to be able to be a resource to them for the housing numbers. So just make sure you're paying attention to these dates and keeping in contact with the office as the calendar runs through. By the time the appropriations process is in full swing and they're starting to get their feet under the ground in Congress, it'll be mid-March, and you'll be very close allies with your new member of Congress. So make sure you get that introductory email, make sure you call the office, and you'll have a new friend in DC.